Warning: Loudmouth Fetus contains adult language, sensitive topics, and sometimes some graphic imagery. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello. My name is Julie. This is the Loudmouth Fetus podcast, and this is episode 1, The Wedge Between the Living Generations and the Effect of Social Media on Those Relationships. This is our first episode, so I do want to give a little introduction before I start. About really just like what is behind this channel, what we intend on doing, what our intentions are in as far as conversation, and just why we're here. Everybody wants to start a podcast. Everybody feels like they have something to say. But I do feel as if I am somebody that can wedge the gap between a lot of people. And I feel like I can wedge, especially between a, generational gap. I'm kind of known for arguing with older people and, trying to prove them wrong, quote unquote. And I think it's really important that we all can kind of talk to each other and we can understand facts without getting upset with each other. And it's really, really important to just be able to talk. And if we can't do that, then nothing will ever get solved, and nor do I think things will get solved. But I think that our generation is the turning point for communication and acceptance and tolerance and everything that we're fighting over right now. On the channel, we'll have a couple different kinds of content happening. We will have some edited videos like the one that you're watching right now. We'll also have more of like a stream, I'm not sure if I'll do them live or not yet. But definitely I'll have, I want to be able to just hop on here if something's going on, or if it's, my scheduled day to do something and there's just something bigger that needs to be talked about. I want to be able to have that freedom as well. I don't want to have everything be a couple days delayed because I have to make the video. So I do want to have two different kind of streams of consciousness happening, where one is more of like a formal put together. I will have everything, all the research, all the images, everything. And then one will be more of like a stream. Like I said, I'm not really sure if I'll do them live. I would like to, but it all just depends. And that would be more of just me either having a conversation with somebody else, or there's something big going on and I'm just kind of dissecting it and trying to figure out, why people are so upset, kind of looking at both sides and trying to understand, what is fueling the hate or the anger or what's happening on both sides. Because I'm somebody that's very neutral. I don't get upset about potato heads or books, or, I don't agree with book burning. I don't, all that stuff is subjective. There's things that are objective and there's things that are subjective, and you need to be able to distinguish between the two. And I feel like that's a big problem in society, is that everybody thinks that because we have free speech, what they say goes. And free speech only protects you from persecution. It does not protect you from Facebook. It doesn't protect you from anything else than the government. And I think it's a big factor, especially with social media. We are expected to still maintain this respect for our elders. We'll keep this mutual respect for people. But with social media and just the way that people interact these days, it's not the same. We don't have the same relationship with people that they did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. The relationships that people have are extremely, extremely different, and they 100% rely on social media now, which is a good thing. I mean, you can talk to anybody in the world now, and I think that's amazing for a lot of reasons: for human rights, for culture diversity, for education. I don't think it's other people's responsibilities to teach about their culture, but I do think that if they're willing to do that, then that's awesome. America is very known for a lack of diversity, or just not a lack of diversity. That's dumb for me to say. Lack of acceptance in diversity. America's always been diverse, obviously. That's kind of the point, but it would be ignorant of me to say that America is accepting of diversity, because we all know that that's not the case everywhere. But it's, we are dealing with a lot of things right now that either they didn't have to deal with when they were our age, or they didn't necessarily care about, or they just didn't know about because the education and the knowledge wasn't there. There's a lot of things going on that, they think they know about, and they have a lot more life experience than us. They've lived through wars. They've lived through, we don't know what other people have been through. We don't know what the older generation, we know that they've had it hard. We're not denying that. We're not denying that Vietnam was a thing, and we're not denying that people got drafted left and right. And, we're not denying that times back then weren't hard. But what we're trying to say is things aren't easy right now either. Things might have been hard in the world back then, but things were financially it was a lot easier to make it back then. It was a lot easier to start a family and buy a house and have a good paying job. And, that would just last you your whole life if you wanted it to. There's nothing wrong with that. There's still people today that, get a job at 18, or they graduate college and they have the same job forever. And there's 100% nothing wrong with that. However, today that's just not the case. Minimum wage, that's a whole thing about, living wage. How much is a living wage? And, in America, we vary so much that that's not even a topic that people across state lines can have, because, some states still have a $7.25 minimum wage. Some states have, I think DC is already at $15. It's the communication is the key, and we aren't able to communicate. Even people my age aren't able to communicate with each other because they all have this idea of I'm right. I'm allowed to have my opinions, and 100%, you're always allowed to have your opinions, and I will fight tooth and nail for you to keep that. However, you have to realize that we live in a society where now, in 2021, you can't just say whatever you want. You can't just be whatever you want. You can't just do whatever you want. People are willing to speak up now. People are willing to do something about it. People are willing to die for this. I think we all saw that back in June with all the, the protests that turned to riots and the police violence, everything. People are willing to die for these causes. And, when people are willing to just write it off as something that's not an issue because this doesn't affect them, that's the most base level of lack of communication. I live in Baltimore. I live somewhere that is extremely diverse, has a very large African American, just minority population in general, and it's very, very prevalent, and it's very noticeable, and people don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear that. Well, I should say nobody wants to hear anything, because nobody wants to hear the truth. They only want to hear what benefits them. I think that is something that was okay in the past. I think that, that mentality of I need to worry about me and mine was something that was like super, super big. And, especially like war and, just the way that society had kind of progressed as time went on. It was very much I gotta take care of me and mine, and, nothing else is important. Which, yeah, nothing else, if I had to come down to something else or my husband and my cat, I would probably choose my husband and my cat. But I also understand that there's bigger things. Like if I have to take some time away from my husband and my cat to do charity work or gather water for the schools or do something like that, I'm 100% willing to do it. I don't expect everybody to be that way. Not everybody has the time or effort or willingness to do that. I don't expect them to. But there's something to be said about the lack of sympathy and care with the older generations towards other, like, people their age and ours and us. They don't discriminate. If you don't fall into, like, their qualifications of, like, what they think that you should be, they just write you off as, like, you don't know what you're talking about. I worked the so-and-so for 50 years. It's like, okay, cool, you did the same job for 50 years and you lived through some shit. Nothing, like, I'm like, great for you. Like, I'm glad that you are now living it up and retiring and you have, you did your 50-year sentence and, cool. I'm very happy for you. I'm very jealous. I wish that I was already at that point. I'm only 25 and I don't think I'm going to retire, to be honest. But, there's a huge disparity in communication and it's shocking. It's really, really shocking. I grew up with a younger family. You know, my parents were 26 when they had me. They were both 26 when they had me. I don't even think my grandmother was 50 when I was born. So I have a very young family, and I never really had that lack of communication or problem with communication with older generation, because I was never really around people that were like old. But now that I'm older, and now that I'm 25, and all of those people that weren't old when I was younger are now like in their 60s and 70s, it's crazy to me how I was so smart and I was so intelligent and I was so mature beyond my years when I was younger. But now that I'm 25 and I still have the same like outspoken, like intelligent, like I can critically think about things, now they don't want to hear it. Now, you know, I'm an adult and they don't care that I might know about this. They don't care. And it's just so funny to me, because they love that you're outspoken and don't care about what people think, and, you know, say whatever you want until it's against them. And then it's like end of the world. It's just funny. It's really funny to me, and it's really frustrating, because 9 times out of 10, I'm just trying to have a conversation. I might be sarcastic in the way that I deliver what I'm saying or what I'm posting or what I'm commenting on somebody. I might be sarcastic in the delivery, but I'm never coming to pick a fight. I don't think that solves anything. I like to ruffle feathers sometimes, but I'm not there to actually like offend them and make them upset, you know, really think that somebody's coming after their opinion. Like if somebody has an opinion and, you know, they ask, why is this happening? And I have a reason, and I have sources that are reputable, or at least I will never like just link a CNN link or something like that, you know. People don't want to hear it. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into it with somebody over the age of 45, because they can't wrap their head around the fact that I might know something that they don't. I get it. Like, you don't want to be shown up by somebody that's your child's age. Like, I get it. Like, it can be embarrassing. Nobody likes being told that they're wrong. Let's clear that. Nobody likes being told that they're wrong. But when you're wrong and you're trying to fight with people about what you're saying is right, but you're like just factually incorrect, that's when you have to really step back and be like, okay, what's the real issue here? Is the real issue the issue, or is it the way that people are reacting to it? Because that's where it goes. I'm sure you've seen, you know, I have this chart up here. This chart is kind of like the names. I'm going to, you know, after this little first part, I'm going to try to use the names instead of just using people. I do have like very specific, like, you know, things for each generation. Kind of just want to go through so that I can use those names so that it'll just be a little bit easier for us to distinguish. So first, the Lost Generation, that says 1890 to 1915. I just feel like anything prior to like World War I, like we have records obviously, but like the Industrial Revolution was just happening. So I feel like it was really hard for us to really distinguish their personalities, how they interact with each other, just because we didn't really have that information. We have diaries, we have resources. We know that how they communicated with each other. That's not what I'm saying. It's not like today where, you know, people that were born in, you know, 1945 are still alive, and we can look at their personality and we can see how they are today versus the beliefs that they were like born into. I feel like anybody born prior to like 1940 won't really have a concept of the world correctly as it is today, just because they grew up in such a crazy different time. You can't control what you're born into. You can't control the time period and the place that you're born into. But it's definitely, it goes to say that, you know, you get mad at old people for not being able to change, but you have to realize that there's people that are alive today where segregation, like, wasn't even a thing until they were, like, 40 years old, 30 years old. And, like, do I think that it's still okay that they have the opinions that they do? No. But people can't just change everything that they know. Are there people that came out of, you know, the 40s, 50s, 60s that weren't racist and, you know, didn't have those beliefs? 100%. There were, you know, interracial marriages. There were, all of those things have always been happening. That's always been a topic with, you know, with race and everything like that. But you have to realize that, like I said, there are people that are still alive that were, you know, they were not just adults, but like full grown, like middle-aged people when all of this stuff was happening. Granted, now they're like 98 years old, so it's not like they can like go out and really do anything about their beliefs. But you have to like put that into perspective. Like, just because, I'm not saying it's okay that they have those opinions. Like, I don't think racism is okay in any way, shape, or form. But you need to realize that they don't have like almost like they don't have an outside perspective. Like, imagine being 40 years old and like every opinion that you have is wrong. Every opinion that you have is actually like the worst possible way you could think about somebody. And it has to be challenging. Like, it has to be really challenging to be an adult. I mean, to a certain extent, you have to know that racism is wrong. But, like, if that's all that you know, I really think people just underestimate human nature and underestimate that it's really that easy to fall into your environment. Like people that are in the Klan. A lot of people that are in the Klan are family. Like, you know, your daddy's in the Klan, your granddaddy was in the Klan, now you're in the Klan. It's very much like a tradition. And, you know, nowadays, you know, anything in the past pretty much 80 years is extremely, there's no excuse. Not that there was ever an excuse, but especially after like the civil rights, there's no excuse for you to outwardly be that way. It's shocking. It's shocking that people really think that people that were alive then aren't still alive and thinking this way. If everybody could just get a vaccine and nobody would be racist anymore, I know that's ridiculous to say. I know that's the dumbest thing I could have possibly said on this podcast. But you know what I mean. If there was a simple solution to it, everybody would jump on board. I know I would. I know if they were like, okay, you have to do this thing and then we'll never have to deal with this ever again. I feel like that would be common sense to do. However, that's not the case. I'm going to go back to the chart. So we kind of talked about the, you know, red through yellow. It kind of makes me sad that they call this the silent generation. Yeah, they were silent. They were dying at war. What do you mean they were silent? I can't even, between World War I and World War II, I can't even imagine. Because it's called the greatest generation and then the silent generation. So the greatest generation went and, like, you know, they were born during World War I and the beginning of Prohibition and everything. You know, the silent generation, just fuck them. They have Prohibition, they have World War II, they have Nazis, they, you know, whatever. It's fine. You know, I just, you know, that kind of peeves me a little bit that they're called the silent generation. A lot went on between 1925 and 1945. And I feel like that kind of just gets swept under the rug. Like, all the men were dying at war, and all the, you know, that was right before the baby boom. So I guarantee that it was probably like today where a lot of people weren't having kids or they only had a couple. But anyway, so then after that are the baby boomers. I think we all know, you know, the whole okay boomer. That's very much a thing now. It's funny. It's really funny. I really enjoy it, actually. I really enjoy old people that think they have an understanding of the world and they like don't even know what a PDF is, or like Netflix is like a challenging topic for them. Like I said, I'm not denying their life experience. I'm not denying the fact that, you know, they had to risk being drafted and they had to go through, you know, I'm not discrediting their life by any means. However, you can't sit here in 2021 and tell me that you have a better grasp on just the world than I do. I don't think that I have a better grasp than you, but I think that we're all about on the same page. And I think that's because what they lack, we have, and what we lack, they have. And if we could just bridge that gap of communication to say, hey, instead of calling me an idiot on Facebook or a libtard on Facebook, I hate using that word, but it's like their biggest insult, and it cracks me up to no end because that is like the worst thing that they can think about, or like a commie. Like, you're really like, I'm literally sitting here telling you that I don't think that we should have free university education, but I'm a commie because like I just think that things are too expensive. Like, it's really funny, and it's really sad though. It's really sad that we can't just communicate with each other. And there are people that age that can communicate. There are people that age that understand, you know, they felt the same way in the 60s that we feel now, that like nobody understands, everything's changing. We do still have those mindsets out there, and we have to hold them very close because you have to remember that they were probably fighting for that back when it was not okay to fight for that. Back when there were sit-ins for women to wear pants. You know, they had to go through all of that. And I 100% respect that. They had to walk so that we could run. They had to do the protests, and they had to do the women's marches. And, you know, I'm not discrediting that at all. You know, we should all be really aware and grateful for that. But don't throw it in our faces. Don't tell us that we're lazy and stupid because we don't have to do those things. You did those things so that we didn't have to do those things. And now we're at a point where we are living comfortably, for the most part, as women at least. We I'm just talking about women in general, like, like women's rights right now. Don't throw it in the face of the people that you did it for. Just because we don't have the same struggles, or we don't have the same like issues, or we don't have to fight for it, doesn't mean that it should be thrown in our face. You should be happy that what you did worked, and that we don't have to deal with those things anymore. You should be happy that we're perpetuating what you started, keeping it going, because it's very easy for society to take a turn. Just change. It's very easy for change to happen without anybody realizing. But it's sad. It's sad to see the communication between the old, like, especially boomers and like people my age, are like, they're like our grandparents' age, and they really think that, you know how grandparents are. They think that, they kind of do know everything, but it's not the same. They don't know, like I said, they don't know what a PDF is. They can't use Microsoft Word. They can't, like, they don't understand that applying for a job isn't walking into a place and being like, hey, I want to work here. They don't have that concept of society that we do, because we're living in it and we're growing up in it. I'm sure in the 60s and the 70s, they felt the same exact way about their parents. They don't understand. They don't understand what I'm going through. They lived, they weren't living in this time. Da, 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 da. Everyone feels this way. But now we can all communicate. And now we all talk on Facebook. And now I get called a loudmouth fetus on Facebook, because I try to talk to old people about how they're wrong and how they should just like read an article about what they're talking about before they're just like, goddamn Joe Biden's ruining everything. Well, actually, I mean, maybe you need to like really look into it a little bit more, because it's probably a lot more than that. The baby boomers kind of were insane. Like, so if you don't know what baby boomers are, it was like after World War II, everybody had a bunch of babies. Like, it's just like a big like celebration. There were so many babies. Like, so many people were born between 46 to 64. Which, yeah, I if you really look, there was a very extreme baby boom between those years. And post World War II, we were kind of on top. It's always been a little questionable if we were on top. We were on top theoretically at the time, America, and everyone was happy. Everyone was having babies, and things were kind of back to normal. Women could stay home because all the men were back from war. It was great. And then that, resulted in Gen X. Gen X is pretty much our parents. If you were born in the 90s or the late 80s, I would say maybe like the 90s or early 2000s, your parents are probably Gen X. Right now, they're probably about between the ages of like 40 and 55, maybe even closer to 60. On this, it says 1965. So yeah, that would probably put them around 45 to 55. Those people are interesting because half of them are going through the same exact thing that people my age are, and half of them act like the world is made of gold. I don't understand it. I will never understand it. The best part to me is that they treat us like we're children still. I 100% can accept that a lot of people my age don't have their shit together. Nobody like 100% has their shit together. I know I don't have my shit together. Like, I know I don't have my shit together 100%. But at the same time, you really have to like, we didn't become this way just like, there's no way that a whole generation just became a certain way and we all have mental health issues. All is a big word. Mental health is a big problem. Just drugs are a big problem. I mean, drugs are drugs. You're not going to escape them. They're not generational. Drugs can affect anybody. However, it goes without saying that drugs have been a big part of our society. I can't tell you how many people that I know. I don't really think I've lost that many people personally that I know. I live in Baltimore. It happens every day. Somebody I know shares something, or somebody, I know plenty of people that used to be addicted to drugs. We didn't all become this way just on accident. There has to be some kind of reasoning behind how every single person in our generation has some kind of like, it's very rare that I meet somebody that like doesn't have like extreme anxiety, some kind of mental issue. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that. That's kind of just like the broad term that I'm using. Some kind of mental health problem or some kind of physical problem. I know, like, personal example, I hurt myself when I was younger, and it's always bothered me, and nobody really ever took it that seriously because I was young. We deal with that still today. We deal with our problems not being taken seriously because we're young. Oh, you have your whole life ahead of you. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't fix my problems. And I feel like that's been our whole lives has just been like, oh, wait till adulthood, wait till this, wait till that. And then adulthood came and slapped us all in the face because the world that we were prepared for isn't the world that we're living in. So it's tricky. It's really tricky. And the generational gap between that is between the baby boomers and their kids. It's like, yeah, there was probably like that, but they, you know, they kind of grew up in the same time. They both really didn't have TV. They didn't have, it's not like our parents to now where like we have Netflix and we have Grubhub where things can be delivered, or we have Amazon Prime where we don't have to leave the house to get pretty much anything that we want. There's just never been this like drastic of a societal change, and we need to figure out how to talk about it. We need to figure out how to say, hey, just because I'm 25 doesn't mean I haven't been through shit. Just because I'm 25 doesn't mean I don't know anything. And just because I'm 25 doesn't mean that you know more than me. Because I can guarantee I can find a couple adults that I know for a fact do not know anything. And they still spout shit on Facebook on a regular basis. It's like, can you tell me the capital of Maryland, and like maybe I'll believe that you know anything about our government? Like, it's just things like I'm not ever like judging anybody based on like I'm weird. I knew all my state capitals at 3 years old. Like that was just my example. It's one of those things where it's like people want you to take them seriously so badly, but the second that you say something, they don't want to take you seriously. And it's like, well, how do you expect this mutual relationship to exist if you can't even talk? If you can't sit and listen for 5 minutes while I say, well, actually now, you know, as a 25-year-old that lives in this society, this is actually what's going on. This is what we're going through. This is what student debt is. This is, you know, this is why student debt is an issue. Not just you guys are so lazy and entitled. And we call them dumb and stupid because they just insult us all the time. Like, I really don't think that a lot of people our age feel that way because they are our parents. Nobody wants to call their parents dumb. Nobody wants to say you're stupid. Like, you don't know what you're doing. But just to a certain extent, it's like when they just come at us telling us that millennials are killing everything and, you know, we don't know what we're talking about. And that's, you know, how are we supposed to defend ourselves? Because, yeah, we're only 25. We don't have life experience, but our first memories are 9/11, and everything's gotten shittier since. So they have to put that into perspective. just a little bit. Like, if I can think about your life and the fact that, like, you grew up in the 70s and 80s and you had to deal with your terrible hair, like, I have sympathy for your terrible hair. If you're watching this and you lived in the 80s and you had terrible hair, I sympathize for you. Could never be me. Anyway, so, you know, it's very odd. It's very odd to see, like, our parents and grandparents interact with each other, and then, like, us and our parents interact with each other. I feel like a lot of parents kind of get it. A lot of people that are younger, like, you know, like when they're, like I said, they're 45 to 55, they are still kind of in the loop. You know, they're not completely out of the whole, like, internet. Most of those people have Facebook and phones and, you know, all that stuff. I think my dad is the only person I know still that has a flip phone. He's like 51 and he still has a flip phone. He didn't even have a phone until 2013. You know, those people still exist, don't get me wrong, but he's also not dumb. Like, he's also, you know, he's purposefully off the grid. He purposefully doesn't want an iPhone. He doesn't want any of that. And he's fine with everyone else wanting it. His girlfriend has a smartphone. Everybody else has normal phones. But that's just him. But most people that age are just like us. You know, they have Facebook and Instagram and, you know, they do all the same things because that's just society now. But then when it comes to, like, things that actually matter, like, you know, topics and politics and human rights and, you know, their community, they don't agree. It's scary because it shows the distrust in us for other generations. We don't trust people just because they're older than us anymore. And that used to be kind of like the respect your elder norm. You know, you respect your elders, you believe them, you know, you trust that what they're saying is correct and will be beneficial for you. But honestly, in that, it's not like that anymore. I've been let down personally by tons and tons of adults. I'm an adult now, but even since I've reached adulthood, like, I've been let down and told the wrong thing and misguided by a lot of adults. And we just don't have that mutual respect anymore because I feel like a lot of us feel that way between, like, people with divorced parents. You know, my parents divorced when I was older, so I didn't really have, like, the whole, like, childhood trauma of divorced parents. But I mean, I still went through some shit, and I still had to deal with like getting over life and just dealing with what was thrown at me. But I feel like that it's really complicated and it's really touchy because, like I said, we live in a society now where we all kind of are allowed to be ourselves, and nobody's really okay with that yet. It's always been very much like lay low, like you don't ever want to look weird or be fat or, you know, do any of those things. And I think that you should do whatever you want as long as you're healthy and not hurting anybody else. A lot of people don't feel that way. A lot of people get offended that a man's wearing a bikini, or, you know, this guy's wearing lipstick, or this girl looks like a man, or, you know, like there's so many bigger issues, but that's what makes them angry. And I think that's what makes us angry, is that we see how they react to things that they shouldn't be upset about. And we aren't there to tell them, hey, like, you're not allowed to be upset about this. But we're also there to say, hey, like, you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that this is becoming okay in our society. Like, I'm not in the business of changing people's minds. I'm in the business of keeping my cool and being able to funnel my energy in a positive way. And I'm in the business of talking to people that relate to me. I don't think that this podcast is here to like change anybody's mind. That's dumb for me to think. I am just here to talk. And that's why that's our thing. You know, we're here to talk. I'm just here to talk. You know, I'm really like, I would love to talk to people that are older than me and, you know, see their perspective on life and see their perspective on why people are so upset about the whole transgender issues and, you know, the Black Lives Matter, and, you know, because that runs a lot deeper than just personal opinion. You know, that runs a lot deeper than people think. Like I said earlier, your age and the time you were born does have a lot to do with that. While I think that it's not acceptable to ever be outwardly, or racist in general, but especially outwardly racist or sexist, or, you know, I think it's a waste of energy to be prejudiced against, like, I don't have time to be mean. People tell me that I'm mean and hateful all the time, but in all reality, like, I don't have time to just be mean to strangers. I don't. Like, well, Facebook's one thing. Like, yeah, I can write a comment and forget about it and it never happened. But, like, I don't have time to go out of my way and, like, say things to people. And most people don't. And I feel like that's normal. Like, it's normal to just, like, it's too much effort to hate that much. Or to get so angry. Like, the whole potato head thing. Like, is it really worth your energy to get that upset about something? I just don't understand. I understand people have, like, you know, I'm not sentimental. I'm not like, oh, Mr. Potato Head was my favorite toy when I was a kid. Like, I'm not sentimental like that. So maybe that's, like, where I fall, like, different from everyone else. Like, I just don't see where it matters. I don't see how them changing something so minute and, you know, that it just doesn't matter. And, you know, if you can't handle the small changes in society, like them changing the name of Mr. Potato Head, how are you ever going to accept the large changes in society that are actually going to matter? It's shocking. It's funny. It's sad. It's scary. It's all of the above, because our generation is like, so I'll preface with saying that I grew up in a 90% white, if not 95% white community, with like 6 Black kids in our graduating class, maybe like a couple Hispanic kids, 100% like just all white. Like, I've always, like, you know, I live in Baltimore, but I grew up in an all white community, and it really shows how out of perspective and out of touch a lot of people are. You know, you can tell who was 100% given their ideals from their parents. And you can see that because their parents also post shitty stuff on Facebook too. And you're like, wow, it makes completely 100% sense why you feel that, like, why you have those beliefs. And like I said, I'll fight tooth and nail for anybody to have the beliefs that they have. However, when you're blatantly wrong and you're refusing to acknowledge that, that's an issue. That's an issue beyond, like, I don't agree with you. That's an issue. Like, there's just something wrong. Like, you need to fix that. But I went to school with you guys. Like, I don't understand how we all came out so different. Like, I don't understand how there's still videos of girls from my high school, not like that I went to school with, but like people that currently go there, that are like saying the N-word on Snapchat and stuff like that. Like I said, kids are dumb. They're going to do dumb shit. But like, just the fact that, you know, I mean, that was a thing when I went there. That's when you go to a white school like that and you don't have, like, it's a thing. And I've never participated in it. And, you know, I don't use that word because I grew up around racists and I don't like hearing it and I don't like using it. And, you know, when it's in art or, you know, like Django, for example, you know, that's not for me to say whether that's right or wrong. I can enjoy the movie, but it's not for me to say if it's right or wrong. And I feel like that's where a lot of people think that just because that something wasn't considered racist 30 years ago and now it is, they're like, well, no, it wasn't racist when I read it. It's like, well, actually it was. You just didn't either know or you didn't care or you just are that out of touch with what's actually happening. For you to ignore something like that isn't necessarily your fault if you don't really know what to look for. But at the same time, when somebody brings it to your attention, you can't just ignore it and say, well, I don't think that that's the case, because you don't get to decide that. You don't get to say that's not offensive because it's not geared towards you. It's not saying all white people love mayonnaise. Then you could say, I'm offended. I don't like mayonnaise. Okay, that's fine. It's geared towards white people. However, nothing that's ever geared toward white people is considered racist. And I need people to realize that, you know, having like a diversity or saying that they want to hire a black person or, you know, what's his name? The guy that directed Get Out, I think it's Jordan Peele. I think that's his name. I think it was him. He said a couple years ago, he wanted to hire like a black writer or like, you know, like a black director. He only wanted to work with like a black like movie crew. And I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll edit somewhere in this video. But white people lost their minds. They were like, that's racist. You are discriminating against us, da da da. And it's like, yeah, on paper, if you write it all down, yeah, it seems discriminatory. But let's put any ounce of context behind this. Like, literally until 50 years ago, like black people and white people couldn't use the same water fountains. And you're going to complain that now black people want a black only crew. Like, the hypocrisy doesn't, like, it's we all know what I'm talking about and we all have experienced it and we all know exactly what I mean. And, you know, if you're my age and you have the same kind of outlook on life that I do, that, you know, it's too much energy to hate people for their race or their gender or their sexuality. Like, I can be a spiteful bitch, but it takes a lot to bring it out of me. And, you know, I'm not going to be an asshole to somebody if they're just existing. And I think that's just a good rule to go by. Like, you can't just be mad at somebody for existing. You know, if somebody calls me a dumbass bitch or something like that, like, one, it doesn't offend me. But two, like, I don't, like, that's what will make me judge them. Not just the fact that they're, you know, a transsexual or that they, you know, they are a specific race or they might have different ideals than me. Like, I don't like to associate with like people that really are really against like things that I care about, but I'm also not going to completely cut them out of my life because that's how you find yourself in an echo chamber of everything that you want to hear. That's just as unhealthy as, you know, not talking to people, is being around people that only reinforce what you're thinking. I shouldn't say I grew up in it, but I definitely experienced that where like, if I didn't have an outside perspective and if I didn't have, you know, if I didn't go to public school and I didn't, you know, I wasn't the mature, like willing to learn child that I was, I would have been just like that. I mean, I would like to think that I wouldn't be, but you're a product of your environment. And it's extremely important to be able to recognize like who you are genetically and epigenetically and biologically. You know, it's important to know that, but it's also important to know what you have to fight against. It's like alcoholism. You know what I mean? If you know that everybody in your family is an alcoholic, you shouldn't drink. You know, if you know that everybody in your family is a racist and you don't want to, like, for example, if you know that your parents are racist and you don't want your kids to grow up with those ideals, you don't take them over there. You don't expose them to that type of environment. You don't expose them to those types of ideals. No, do I think that I'm a special case in the fact that I kind of came out differently than most people do? Somewhat. I do like to pride myself on the fact that I 100% disagree with everything that most of my family stands for. You know, I grew up in a house that had a Confederate flag everywhere you looked. My house didn't, but I was at my grandparents' house a lot, and that's the house that I'm talking about. There's Confederate flags, and there's everything. And if I didn't have that outside perspective of this is not that it like when you're young, you don't realize that it's not necessarily not okay. But, I liked history when I was younger. I always liked history. I always liked geography. I was always very in tune with like social studies and everything that kind of engulfed that topic. It's, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look back at history and see, oh, like, that's not okay. Like there was some serious shit going on. Like now to this day I love documentaries, and I always have. And it's really wild to me as a person that people can watch like documentaries about like the civil rights era or Martin Luther King or even like the Rodney King riots in the 1992. Like people can watch stuff like that and like still just not understand what's happening. And I think that's kind of where our generation is leading because, we might not have lived through it, but we have a full archive, somewhat unbiased if we find the right source, of everything that's happened in recorded human history. We don't have to live through it. We have full accounts by multiple people. Sometimes we even have footage. And I think that's why 9/11 fucked us all up so bad, because we all watched it happen on TV. Nobody saw Pearl Harbor unless you were there. You didn't see it happen on TV. I think the first like real thing that happened on TV was that space shuttle that exploded in like the 80s or whatever. I'll look up and see what actually happened. But it's like we are physically watching everything happen while being able to fully access almost any part of history that we want. There's a documentary that I've watched, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it too. It's Oliver Stone's The Untold Story of the United States. That will blow your mind 100%. I mean, there's obviously things in there that like I already knew, or like you knew that something wasn't right, but you just didn't really understand what was going on. That movie will change your perspective of a lot of the things that not only that you learned in school, even college. Like there were things that I learned in college when I was like, this just doesn't seem right. Like it's wild. It's really wild. And when people talk about whitewashing, like it's not a joke. Growing up in America, you are pretty much taught that America's like the hot shit of the world, and we win everything and nothing, we have safety and freedom and liberty and like all this stuff, and like yeah, we do, but at what cost? You look back at history and you really look at like what's happened, and you're like, oh my God, like we destroyed countries. We swooped in World War II and defeated the Nazis, and we have things like that, but we took the Nazis in. We took half of the Nazis in, and then we made them part of the American government. Like, you have to really like look at it with perspective and say, we might be good, but we're not. Like, this is scary. People just don't have that, like, and you try to say that to somebody that like lived through it, and they're like, we beat the Nazis, blah 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 blah, and it's like, thank you, I appreciate you for beating the Nazis. Nobody wanted them to win. Like I think everybody that's alive today, except for maybe some questionable people, are happy that the Nazis lost. However, you have to realize that America didn't always swoop in and for the greater good of the world. They swooped in for the greater good of themselves. And I feel like a lot of people our age can see that, and a lot of people that are older, like the boomers and the, Gen X and anyone prior to that, they don't see that. America, they still have this huge sense of nationalism that, that you can't break. And while I think that's a good thing, like I feel like it's good to have, you should love where you live, and you should love the country that you're fighting for, and you should love, what you're doing, like where you are in life. America on paper is a great idea. We have a lot of opportunity. We have freedom. We have freedom of speech. You can talk against the government. You can say whatever you want. And I don't think that America is necessarily the worst, I mean, definitely not the worst country in the world to live. I'm also a white person. I live somewhere that I don't have to worry about those things. I don't live in the South, or I don't live in Saudi Arabia where women are still objects. There's perspective on everything, and I feel like that's kind of lost with the fact that people don't want to hear the truth. And you can have perspective, and you can have, everybody has their opinion on things, but you can't ignore facts. You can't ignore history, and that's why history is repeating itself, because nobody wants to really look at the facts and say, this is what's happening. Democrats, Republicans, everybody falls under this, because right now we're all so lost. Nobody really knows what's going on. You can say that you're a Republican until you're blue in the face, and it's just, it's not that simple anymore. It's really not. And you really have to prove yourself to the people that you're trying, like your constituents and your peers. And it's not as simple as it used to be. It's not anywhere near as simple. So finally, after that little tangent I went on, so the Gen Z, and then they call them Zennials and then Millennials. I don't know how I feel about these terms, only because I feel like if you're born between 75 and 85, you probably have the same ideals as like those you see, like the dark green, like the baby bus generation, the Gen X. I feel like you kind of have the same outlook on life. Maybe those later, like maybe in like the 80s, might have a little bit of a different outlook. But it even says like the millennials, Gen Y, is 1980 to 1995. So I would definitely just, I don't know, I kind of discredit that whole Zennial like 10-year decade, because it kind of falls between the Gen X and the Gen Y. And, I understand that everybody kind of has a different experience in life, but I don't really see how things could really change that much in those years. In the 70s anyway. Like if nowadays things change drastically in 5 years, I could definitely understand that. It goes without saying that, that gap right there might be what is really holding us. I have some family members that fall into that category of 75 to 85, and they have, I don't know if it's still that generation that just kind of like keeps the peace and keeps their mouth shut because, it's just easier to do that or what. But I don't know. People that are born between those years, I found, are either very indifferent or they just kind of like lay low. I don't know. I don't know what it is about those, like that generation, like that decade of babies that were born. It's very strange. And I think I'll look into that a little bit further. Maybe we'll look into that and see if there's any like research on why that's its own specific thing. But then millennials, that's 1980 to 1995. I was born in December of 1995. I just skirt by this. However, I was the youngest of 6 other cousins my entire life. And I was like the youngest person in my class. So I've always had to be more mature. I've always, watched what the older kids were watching. I've always hung out with people that were older than me. So yeah, while I'm not like, I barely skirt into that millennial category, I can definitely relate to a lot of the things that they're going through. I got married very young. Around the time that a lot of, actual millennials were getting married, I was getting married too. They were in their mid to late 20s and I was 20 years old getting married. I feel like where, my age might lack, I do have that life experience or life knowledge. Like I know what's up. I know what's going on. I know that life is shit. I know life is hard. Marriage is hard. Everything's hard. Like we're all at the same page at this point. People are like, only 90s kids remember this. It's like, just because I was born in 1995, December of 1995 at that, just does not discredit me from experiencing what I experienced. Like I watched shows that now like I couldn't even remember the name of, and I had to do what the big kids wanted to do or else I couldn't play. That kind of jolts you into like what, they were the actual millennials. And, now I feel I have a lot different outlook than a lot of my cousins, and, a lot of them don't talk to me anymore. But, I feel like it has a lot to do with the fact that I was raised around a lot of there was nobody younger than me ever. Like I was always the youngest. That plays a huge role in who you are as a person. Like I had to be like a big kid, so I acted like a big kid. I'm still that way. Like I still have a hard time like being playful and funny because Nobody wanted to be around you if you were like a goofball. Like, you know, everybody wanted you to be like mature. And I mean, it made me mature as an adult. Like, it made me, you know, I have a very different outlook because of it. But at the same time, it gives you a weird perspective on the whole like generation thing. Just because people tell me like, there's no way you can remember the 90s. There's no like, I might not remember them like day by day, but I remember the 90s. I had an impeccable memory when I was younger. I remember the millennium. I remember things like, I mean, I know this was after, or no, actually might have been before 2000. The whole Cal Ripken, his home run record, I think. You know, like, I was there. Like, I remember things in the 90s. Like, just because I wasn't like like, I was only like 4 years old, doesn't mean that like I don't remember the stuff. You know, and just because, you know, you were 4 years old when I was born, and then you know, progressively got older, we still had very similar experiences. We all had to go through the 2000s as kids. And that's also like a big like competition between people, is that like, you're not a real millennial. It's like, are we really going to fight about that? Or are we going to fight about the fact that we're all poor and half of us are still like making minimum wage, and all we want is like basic things, and everybody yells at us for being lazy? Like, yeah, sorry that we want to go to college for the same price that our parents went to college, and sorry that we don't think that we should have to pay ridiculous premiums to go to the doctor. We don't have jobs that offer us health insurance. A lot of us do, but a lot of us also don't. And that's not something that people have nowadays. Our parents, like I said, they got jobs at 18 and they worked, you know, forever. Like, I know that my dad is about to hit 25 years at his job next year. That doesn't exist in our generation. Like, I don't know somebody that's had the same job their entire adult life. Like, with the exception of like maybe somebody that went to school to be a teacher or a nurse. There's like, obviously like people get jobs during college and stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. But like, even like teachers, like I've seen people go and get teaching degrees and like everything, and then in a couple years they're doing something completely different. Like, power on them, do their thing. But like, that's concerning. That's a problem. Like, people should be going to college for a career, and then like that should be their career. Like, if you want to change your career, 100% fine. But like, the pace that people are doing it is crazy, because the world is just so insane. You're a teacher and parents are yelling at you because their kids aren't doing their work, and it's your fault somehow. You're a nurse, and now people are telling you that you don't know about anything about the medical profession. I mean, COVID, and you know, I couldn't imagine. If you're a nurse or a teacher, or I'll just say nurse or a teacher, or anything that falls into those things, bless you. Because right now I would be losing my shit. And I wanted to go to school to be a teacher. That's what I originally went to college for. And I'm honestly very happy that I didn't go through with it, because I would not be happy right now. And I feel terrible for everybody that has put themselves through years and years of school for what they wanted to be downplayed or discredited. Just the stuff that I've heard about teachers and nurses, I use those two specifically because right now those are kind of the two that are both under fire. It's crazy. It really is. Like, you know, there's bad nurses, there's bad teachers, and I'm never going to deny that, but you can't just. So then finally we have Gen Z, and apparently now we have Gen Alpha. I've never heard of that, but I guess it's also just because they're like just now like turning 10, so they don't really have Facebook or anything yet. God, I hope. But so yeah, the Gen Z are like the people that we make fun of for like eating Tide Pods and being on TikTok, and you know, I think that this, you know, I have a sister in this generation, and I think that they're very intriguing, and it's also very disturbing to think about, because they don't know a world that isn't this. Neither do I, but I can at least remember a time when things weren't like this. Do I think that it's important that things are being spoken about? Absolutely. And I don't think that things were better because everyone kept quiet. But I do think that they don't know a world where like you say one wrong thing and you are like canceled. Cancel culture is something that is like, it's iffy. It's really iffy, and my opinions vary because it really just depends on the situation. They don't know a world where like people are allowed to make mistakes. Like, people are allowed to say something wrong. I mean, I think people should be punished for if they say something wrong or offensive, or if they don't acknowledge it, then something should be done. But they don't understand a world where like you're allowed to do something wrong and it's not the end of the world. And I think that's really scary because, they're very, like, people are very quick to be like, oh my God, he said something wrong in 2008. We can't support him. And it's like, if I went back to all the dumb shit that I said, like, I was never like racist but just like calling things gay or, just dumb shit like that every teenager does. It's like, if everybody did that for like my generation, like, we would all be canceled. And that's just the truth. I mean, like, everybody has said or done something that's now deemed unacceptable. And that's just how society changes. But you have to realize that you're not allowed to say those things, but you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to be like, oh my God, I should have never said that. I didn't think about it. I'm really sorry. And, I understand the public being weary about it for a while, but we live in a society now where these kids are just savage and they don't care. They're like, oh, he said that gay people were weird in 2007. We're never supporting him again. And, well, it's like, I appreciate the sentiment of like, yeah, we can't support somebody that has these beliefs. At the same time, it's like, you have to put that into perspective that back then it wasn't the end of, like, it was still offensive, but it wasn't the end of the world for somebody to say something like that. It was a very commonplace, like, insult, or it was a very commonplace, like, euphemism, or, it was just something that was said a lot. And it, what is right and what's wrong is 100% based on society. And as society changes, it's, just the same thing as the N-word. That word, I mean, it's still to this day used out in public, and it's been adopted by the Black community, which is, I mean, power on them. Like, that's great. If you can use your slur as something that you can use, that's amazing, I think. Just like how gay people have now reclaimed queer. It's great. Like, if you can empower that, it's the same way that I use, if you have to use what people have against you to empower you, or else you're not going to get anywhere. If you don't have anything, that's what you have. You have yourself and you have your community. And this Gen Z, they're not about community. Like, they're about helping. Like, I've never seen a generation that wants to, like, care about people so much. They're very woke per se, where, like, they care about the illegal immigrants in the camps, and they care about Flint, Michigan. And, I've never seen kids care about stuff like this. Like the whole, what's her name? Greta Thunberg or whatever, about the whole global climate change, stuff like that. I've never seen kids be this, like, opinionated and outspoken. And I think that's great. Like, I think that if you're that kind of person, like I'm that kind of person where I can just talk and talk and talk, you should do that, because there's not a lot of people out there like that. And if you have something to say that you think is important, you should say it. Whether I agree, like, personally, whether I agree with what they're saying or not, I think that it's great. But like I said, they don't know what it's like to live in a society where, say Greta Thunberg said something that was slightly offensive, or, just, she never did, but just say that she had slipped up and said something wrong. Like, nobody would have respected her anymore. And it's like, you need to earn that respect back. But at the same time, it shouldn't be that easy for everyone to just drop you like that. I think it's really important to let people explain themselves. I think it's really important to let people talk about what they're trying to say, because not everybody is as eloquent as you are. Not everybody can sit there and really form their thought correctly as quickly as you can. Some people say something and then they're like, oh wow, that came out really wrong, I need to, like, re-say it, but it's too late, it's already out there. Especially with things like Twitter and, live streams, and, if you say it happened. Like, you can't take it back. Like, you can explain it away all you want, but you can't take it back. And it's really important to really put that into context in today's society, because people are digging up old tweets. People are, all kinds of, like, old Facebook posts, and, like, people change. Like, if you're the same person at 25 that you were at 16, like, there's a problem. And while I think that, if you're, like, if you tweeted something offensive and you're still saying the same dumb shit 10 years later, yeah, you should be canceled. Like, that's, like, you know what I mean? Like, not about your opinions, but just about like the way that you approach it. Like if you can't approach your opinion without being offensive to other people, then you need to reevaluate, you need to reevaluate your opinions. So I'll end on saying this. I know that I didn't really get to go fully in detail about, my personal opinions and experiences with the different generations. I definitely have, maybe from like yellow down I've dealt with. But like I said, even like the Generation Alpha, like they're going to be really interesting people. And I'm really excited to see how that goes, because it's going to be one of those things where they're either, they're either like, I just hope that they like bring back the big hair and the scrunchies, because I just want to see another generation embarrass themselves. It's always fun to see how each generation embarrasses themselves with their choice of fashion and hair and clothing. And, we lived through the Aeropostale days where, like, I remember I couldn't fit into, like, Aeropostale when I was in high school and middle school, probably more. And it was, like, the most devastating thing to me, because I've always been, I was 5'11" by the time I was in high school. So I've always been bigger and tall. So I remember it being, like, devastating that I couldn't wear the clothes that everyone else was wearing. And now that I look back, I wore my fair share of embarrassing clothes. I wore polos and, like, things that I would never even touch nowadays. But at the same time, I'm kind of grateful that I look back and I'm like, wow, I didn't, like, succumb to those terrible styles, because society wouldn't let me. Society didn't make clothes big enough for me. And honestly, thank you. Thank you, society, for not caring about big girls, because I kind of missed a lot of the shitty fashion trends of my childhood. So yeah, this was episode 1 of Loudmouth Fetus. I don't expect every episode to be like this. Everything will be kind of different. I do like to talk a lot though, so I will try to edit this, in a way where it doesn't seem like I'm just rambling. I do lose my train of thought sometimes, so I am a little anxious about doing a live stream, just because I would have to have like a very detailed outline, or like a conversation with somebody that I would have like a very detailed, like pre-written outline for it. So, we'll definitely see where this goes. I'm really excited about this, and if you're watching this, thank you a million times. I don't feel like people should listen to me, but I do feel like I have something to say. And if you don't think that, then, I'm not offended. I know how it is to be like, listen to my podcast, I have something to say. And like, you don't really give a shit about what they have to say. I get it. But if you like this, I'm really going to try to put out videos at least once or twice a week, maybe even 3 times if there's something going on. I'm going to get Twitch. I have a YouTube channel. I have my Instagram. I will put those in the video, at the end, so that you can follow those. Thank you. If you're watching this, I probably know you personally. I just want to thank you so much. There's been so many people that have supported me in all of the things that I've been doing, whether it's been my art or my baking and just life in general. Thank you times a million. It really means a lot. Your support is what makes me feel like I can do things like this. Definitely a confidence boost when you have friends that are like, not only want to see you succeed, but they want to help you. They want to be on your podcast. They want to talk to you about things. That means a lot more than you realize. And, I have friends that even offered up a studio space and things like that. Like, thank God I already have one. That's my husband, because he put all this together for himself and then I stole it. But yeah, so I just, once again, thank you. Please like and subscribe the channel. Please share. If you turn the bell on, anything that can grow this channel will be beneficial to not only the channel and myself, but whatever topics we cover, because the bigger I get, the bigger of a voice I have, and the more I can talk to more people. And that's all I want to do. I just want to talk to people. I just want to understand other people's perspectives. And I just want to know why people are so goddamn angry all the time. Because I know I am angry all the time, but it's not about the shit that these people are angry about. And I just want to figure it out. So once again, thanks a million. I really can't express, if you've made it to this part of the video, how grateful I am for you. It really means a lot. I don't have like a really like supportive family. I don't really have like, a lot of my family doesn't talk to me. So it means a lot that my friends are there no matter what. It means a lot that I can rely on people that I never expected to rely on. And it means a lot that there are people out there that don't think that I'm just an idiot, because most people in my life do, because I'm just loudmouthed and I won't like just shut up to keep the peace. But hopefully I can channel that into this, and I can, even if it's me talking at my computer screen for an hour, I can channel it into something that can be beneficial. I can channel it into something that, I do a lot of charity work. I can channel it into that. I can channel it into my community. There's a lot of things that I can do with this, and I have a lot of people that I can talk to, and I have a lot of people that I can learn from, and I want that personally. So I really appreciate you, and like I said, please like and subscribe the channel. Share it if you can. I hopefully will be posting, I'm gonna say, Friday and Sunday, so we'll kind of see how that goes. I'm not 100% sure if those days are going to stick, but I'm gonna know that today's Friday, so I'm gonna post that, and then hopefully maybe I'll just have like a 20 to 30 minute live stream one day a week. I don't know. Like I said, it's all very up in the air, and we're going to see where it goes. But if you stick with me and you subscribe and we keep growing, then I'm just going to keep going, and we're going to see how it goes. Thank you so much. And this is episode 1 of Loudmouth Fetus.